And good afternoon. This is Dr. Rich Bernardo, author of Alchemy, the Leadership Simulation. Back in my alchemy lab with my unknown alchemist behind me. And while he fiddles with his chemicals and tries to turn lead into gold, you indeed are going to turn lead into gold if we equate the people whom we work with, as well as ourselves, as lead, and the idea of transformation as into gold as a group of people who are futures-based, who know how to accept and create the changes that they want to assure themselves and their stakeholders, and in our cases, the children whom we serve, as in preferred futures. This particular video is directed directly to the persons responsible for collaborative leadership. That would be the politician in the World Out There team, and that would be the principal in the educational leadership team. Bear in mind that it's possible, depending on the number of participants in the simulation, that other people might also have that role. But the specific role has been assigned to, again, the politician and to the principal. I think you can see in both cases that collaborative leadership is clearly a skill that both sets of folks need to have in order to be effective in this day and age, in any day and age, but certainly in this day and age, in these so-called troubled times. At any rate, you've already seen another video that we produced for this website that speaks about the premises of collaborative leadership from a theoretical with a small t perspective. I'll probably dabble back in that in a moment as well. But really, what I want to do is just give you a kind of a simple scenario of an example of collaborative leadership. Forgive me, Mr. or Mrs. Politician. The situation I'll lay out will be one in a school setting, but I think you can think of lots of ways that a similar scenario would play out behind closed doors when politicians try to make things happen. Again, the premise I always use when I talk about collaborative leadership is that none of us is as smart as all of us. Is a saying that people like to believe, and it's sort of true, but it's even more nearly true when everyone knows how to be smart together. That's another story, especially in either of the two settings that I'm placing you in, when people get buried by the number of I hyphen thinks. Well, I think, well, I think, well, I think, and nobody bothers to think about what we think or what we all might think. And that's a skill set. It's a disposition to some extent, but it's clearly a skill set to, I think Covey called it active listening. Senge called it dialogue. And either of those two examples apply. Dialogue meaning that people talk, TWO, to talk with each other in order to create something together. And again, easier to speak about, but a lot more difficult to press the buttons to make that all happen. Now, your job, as we've already said, is to enable everyone to recognize the needs to be smart together, to listen to each other, and to find ways to collaborate with each other. One more point I'll make before I get the scenario, something I've taken from educational researcher Joseph Raelin, who speaks about collaborative leadership as making a sense of common reality. Those of you who have ever seen The Magnificent Seven or have seen the Japanese movie, whose name I can't remember right now, he smiled with embarrassment. Yeah, you wouldn't recognize an example of what we mean by different versions of reality. There's an election coming here in the United States about in 2 or 3 days from now. Certainly, people are voting to create their sense of reality, which is in large opposition to someone else's sense of reality. And unfortunately, we're going to need someone who's going to be able to create a common sense of reality wherein everyone can join in together with a common purpose. Nonetheless, that's my example of common sense of reality. Now, let me give you a great example of collaboration It's actually a true one. When I was the principal of an elementary school back before most of you were born, we had several shared decision-making meetings where we were charged with trying to create all kinds of actions and strategies to make a very good school an even better one. After all, when you start trying to be good, you start getting better. And we will subscribe to that point of view. So we decided we were going to do a science fair. Actually, I think it was a STEM fair. And one of the teachers stepped up and said that she would take charge of it, and she did a great job organizing it. And the committee that we were addressing was made up of parents, of myself as the administrator, fellow teachers, and also of the custodial staff, as well as I believe that some of the cafeteria people were involved too, and the paras, and the secretaries. So it was a melange of folks all committed to helping each other see perspectives that we may not ordinarily see. So Mrs. K came in with a great plan, front to back, left to right, pretty much everything under control. The custodian was sitting there, head custodian, and he's shaking his head left to right, and I couldn't overlook the fact that he was shaking his head left to right. And he was a person usually not afraid to speak his mind, sometimes when we didn't necessarily need to hear it. And I said to him, okay, Mr. X, there's something you see as a problem. He says, well, it won't work. Everybody started to hump and whore and say, well, this is the typical head custodian, we can't do this kind of thing. Until someone said, well, what do you have in mind? What are you thinking about? And he said, well, a couple of things. First of all, this is on a Friday night. We're going to have 300 or 400 parents in the cafeteria where we're going to hold this. And if we're going to hold it in the cafeteria, you're going to have to run electricity from the outlets to a lot of the presentations. And so I said, yeah. I said, have we got enough electricity? Thinking he was going to say no. And he said, no, we have plenty of electricity and we have about enough outlets, but what's going to happen is we're going to blow every circuit breaker in the room when we overload it with all of the other needs that we need to have for that night. And we said, oh, so we kind of scratched our head about that. Then he said, not only that, I'm going to have to call in extra custodians, which means I have to pay overtime for the custodians to clean up afterwards. And I haven't got that in my budget. I'm a little embarrassed to share that with you because I probably should have figured that part out myself, but I had not. And it was good that he pointed both of these issues out, especially the overtime point. So I said, well, I can call central office and I think I can work that piece out for you. He said, okay. He said, what are we going to do about the electric? And that took maybe 10 or 20 minutes of conversation before people came up with all kinds of ideas about having exhibits that didn't need as much electricity, or about sharing some battery power kinds of things. And lo and behold, when the night was over, the planning night was over, I should say, all was put together, everything was accounted for, and the fair went off without a hitch. It was very successful. And it would not have been successful had we not created a sense of collaborative leadership, where everyone who was part of that particular group was empowered by each other, not by me necessarily, was empowered by each other to hear what each other had to say and to be open to hearing points of view and perspectives that had to be accommodated in order for us to be successful. A politician may have to sit in a smoke-filled room someplace where they would have to negotiate issues about allocating monies or obtaining funds to build that bridge across the water, or to build a road someplace that needed a road. And yes, they'd horse trade votes with each other in order to make that happen. And more likely than not, listen to the experts whom they brought in, the engineers in their cases, what they needed to do in order to be successful at getting the proper legislation. All of this is about a skill set that you are going to exemplify on two levels. One would be, quite frankly, just pointing out these issues to your colleagues. And another one would be, probably more importantly, to be the exemplar, to act the way they needs to be acted in order to create the atmosphere and the set of dispositions to make this happen. When you put collaborative leadership together with systems thinking, together with cultural awareness, together with creative thinking, with futuring, you have a formula for not only for change, but for sustained futures-based change. And we're really counting on you to keep these scenarios in the back of your mind.